Okay, we are now on to the solar system as our space portion of the class. This first video, you're going to take any 5 notes based on the video below. They do not have to be in complete sentences, but any 5 notes based on the video below. Now, these are not the only notes you have to take for the notes. You have to take all the notes in order to get your full points. So don't just take 5 notes on the video below, come up and show me the notes and expect full credit. You will not get that. Type any 5 notes based on the little musical video below. It's a little cartoon. Take any 5 notes, but you have to continue on and take all the notes on the solar system. Okay, one more time. Don't just type the 5 notes below and expect to get full credit. Type all the notes following this cartoon as well. All right, here we go. Again, type any 5 notes you want. It's a little 2-minute musical cartoon. Any 5 notes you want, and you will get credit for this portion of the notes.
Story box. We can see the whole solar system from here. I think we can hear it from here too.
We are the planets of the solar system, different sizes for everyone. The music never ends, we are such good friends, and we all orbit the sun.
Here comes the sun, rapping first on this track. From the beginning, I'm the center of the solar system. Planets be spinning around me, so hot, I'm roasting, you see. Now I pass the mic to the planet closest to me.
Mercury, the smallest planet, small as Earth's moon.
I get super hot and cold and it's been very slow.
I'm Venus, I got mountains and volcanoes and spray. I'm the same size as Earth, but spin the opposite way.
Yeah, I'm Earth, I'm the home to every boy and girl.
Such a beautiful, beautiful world.
I'm Mars, a red planet. I got deserts and ice, and I've got 2 moons. That's like 1 moon twice.
I'm Jupiter, the biggest planet. I'm humongous, gargantuan. I spin the fastest, rap the fastest, plus I'm handsome, blam son.
Oh please, I'm Saturn. Check out my beautiful rings, made up of billions of rocks, dust, and other things.
I'm Uranus. I say that with pride. Okay, I lied. I'm embarrassed because I'm the only planet lying on its side.
I'm Neptune. I'm cold, dark, windy, and mysterious. I'm very stormy, so bring an umbrella. I'm serious.
We are the planets of the solar system, different sizes for everyone. The music never ends, we are such good friends, and we all orbit the sun.
Well, we are done exploring the solar system. I am thirsty. Let's explore the rest of the Milky Way galaxy.
That video is so awesome. I can't even stand it. I love that thing. I want to sing it like every night. It's so cool. Anyway, hopefully you type 5 notes on that video. That is not all the notes you have to take. So don't stop here and come up and show the notes right now. You still have to take all the other notes on the solar system. Okay? Don't do that. Here we go. All right, solar system. Here are some cool facts about the solar system. First of all, the sun is by far the biggest thing in our solar system. In fact, it makes up 99.85% of the mass of the entire solar system. It's like really big or something. The planets, on the other hand, make up the other 0.15% of the mass of the solar system. So when you compare the sun to all the planets, including Earth, the sun is significantly bigger. Significantly bigger. It's not even close. Like you can take all the planets, put them inside the sun, and you'd still have a lot more sun than all the planets. Since the sun is the biggest object, it has the largest gravity. So therefore, all the planets will orbit around the sun, not the sun around the planets. Back in the old days, in ancient times, people thought that the planets were the center of the solar system and that the sun rotated around the planets, specifically the Earth. That's not true. Because the sun's so big, the planets actually rotate around the sun. So, sun's in the middle, planets circle or orbit around the sun. When they orbit what are called ellipticals. Now, these are circles, but they're not really complete, like circles. In other words, they're not totally round. They're actually what are called ellipticals, meaning they're kind of elongated or stretched circles. So it's like you take a circle and you kind of flatten it out. That's an elliptical. So, solar system, mostly made of the sun. Planets make up the other small amount of the solar system. So therefore the planets orbit or circle around the sun in circles which are actually called ellipticals because they're kind of like flat circles. All right, terrestrial planets. These are the planets that are closest to the sun. They're very near the sun. So if they're close to the sun, what's that mean? Well, they're hot. And when they're hot, that means most of the gases on those planets and honestly most of the liquids have been burned around or burned away, leaving small rocky planets. Since they're close to the sun as well, the atmosphere for most of these planets is either thin or there's no atmosphere whatsoever. Again, why? Because they're close to the sun is hot, and the sun has burned away the atmosphere on most of these planets. Earth is a terrestrial planet. It still has a little bit of atmosphere, but it's not as big of an atmosphere as some of the planets that are far away from the sun. Those 4 planets that are considered what are called terrestrial planets are Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. These are the 4 planets that, once again, are near the sun. They're small and rocky, and they have little or no atmosphere whatsoever. So those are the terrestrial planets. As we move farther out into the solar system, so farther away from the sun, we get what are called Jovian planets. Jovian planets, like I mentioned, are far away from the sun, and since they're farther away, they tend to be cooler planets because the sun's heat is not as close to them, so therefore they have more gas. So these planets tend to be larger, and mostly they're made of gas. You don't get as many rocks on these planets. They're mostly made almost entirely of gas. Since they're made of gas, they have very thick atmospheres, which means a lot of storms, probably turbulent weather, high wind speeds, because the sun's energy can't get to them as well, so therefore they're bigger because they basically can't evaporate the gases on the planet. So very thick atmosphere and turbulent weather. And also two of the characteristics of the Jovian planets are that they have a lot of moons and a lot of rings. Some of the inner planets, some of the terrestrial planets have moons. We don't have rings, especially here on Earth, but we don't have as many moons and rings as the Jovian planets. And again, this is because these planets are farther away from the sun, therefore they don't get as much heat, so therefore they have more mass because the sun's heat can't affect them, and therefore melt or evaporate any of, not all of, but parts of those planets. These planets are Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Those are the 4 Jovian planets. So again, Jovian planets, farther away from the sun. Since they don't get as much of the sun's heat, they tend to be pretty large because the sun can't melt them or evaporate their gases or liquids. So they're mostly made of gas, very thick atmosphere, and all of them have moons and all of them have rings. So Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are the Jovian planets. So how all this happened? Well, one of the beliefs of how the solar system came about is the nebular theory. Now, let me stress this. The nebular theory is not necessarily true. It's not necessarily false. And here's why. Back when the solar system and frankly the whole universe was created a long time ago, there were no humans around. So since there were no humans around, there's no records of how all this happened. So this is just a theory, and there are many theories on how not only the solar system but the universe as a whole are created. But the truth is, scientifically, we can't prove any of these things because we weren't around as humans. So is the nebular theory true? It might be. There's some pretty good evidence that supports it. But do we know 100% if it's true? No, we do not. So it's just a theory. It's just one of our guesses on how the solar system came about. Like I mentioned, it is a theory. We don't know for sure. And here's why. The sun and the planets were believed to have started from a rotating cloud of gas and dust. Basically, there's this cloud of gas and dust that's just out there floating in the universe. As this cloud of gas, as you can see down in the video below, began to gain size, it starts to rotate or spin. As the cloud began to spin more and more, it increased in speed, basically because it's getting more mass, more gas, more dust, more particles. As it's becoming more massive, it's getting faster. The increase in the speed caused all the big particles, so basically all the rocks and all the bigger pieces of dust and bigger particles overall go to the middle of the circle. And all the smaller particles stay on the outside of the cloud. So all the gases basically went to the outside, and all the rocks and bigger clumps go to the middle. And what happened was, as these clumps kind of smashed together and combined, they began to create bigger clumps. It's kind of like if you had a piece of Play-Doh and 10 of your friends also had pieces of Play-Doh, and you guys had a big Play-Doh war, and you threw them at each other, and they started to clump together. Eventually, you're going to have a bigger Play-Doh, piece of Play-Doh, and that's basically what happened with this. Planets grew by a process called accretion. As you can see from the spinning cloud below, again, the particles go to the middle, they start to run into each other. As they run into each other, that matter makes bigger matter, so bigger pieces. The cloud begins to spin faster and faster, and so the planets are created basically from smaller clumps that collide to make bigger masses. So again, the nebula theory, not sure if it's real or not. No one was around. We have good scientific evidence that supports it, but we are not sure. It's what we believe the sun and the planets were believed to started from. It started as a cloud of gas and dust. It began to spin. It began to get bigger. Particles that were bigger went to the middle. The rocks, they collided. They created the sun. The planets, all of those things go to the middle. All the gases go to the outside. That's why the inner planets are rocky and the outer planets are gassy. And this was all called accretion. Now again, we're not sure if this is true or not. We have a pretty good idea, but we don't know for sure because humans were not around at that time. So let's take a tour of the planets in the solar system. The first one's Mercury. Mercury is closest to the sun. It's a very hot planet. But what's unique about Mercury is it has no atmosphere. Reason why? Close to the sun. The sun has burned away the atmosphere of Mercury. So, since it has no atmosphere, this is crazy stuff. During the day on Mercury, it's really, really hot. Really hot during the day. Because the sun's shining on it, it's close to the sun, so it's really hot. However, at night, it's actually very cold on Mercury. Here's why. In the summer, when you maybe roll your windows up and lock your car and you go into a store or whatever, you come back out, your car's hot. Why? Well, your windows were rolled up, so the heat gets trapped inside. It's called the greenhouse effect. Well, if you don't have something to trap that heat in, say you open your windows, the heat would escape, the car would be cooler. Same thing happens on Mercury. There's no greenhouse effect on Mercury because it has no atmosphere. So during the day, the heat comes, it's all around the planet, but at night, the heat escapes and goes back into basically space. So Mercury is very hot on the day side of the planet, the side of the planet that has the sun, and at night it's very cold because it has nothing to trap that heat in. Another cool aspect about Mercury is it kind of looks like our moon. As you can see, if you look at this video, you can see there's all these scars, all these marks on Mercury. Those are what are called craters. Here's a good picture close-up of one of the craters. Basically, craters on Mercury and frankly on our moon are created by objects from outer space. Meteorites, meteors, comets, anything flying from outer space that collides with that planet. Same thing happens with our moon. Basically, these particles come into the atmosphere of all planets, and in most planets, especially ours, it's burn up. These objects are burn up. Unfortunately, Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere, so there's nothing to burn up, for these objects to burn up. So they hit the planet, and they damage the planet, creating all of these marks, all of these circles, all of these scars on Mercury. And that's created by the fact that Mercury has no atmosphere, nothing to protect it. So Mercury is constantly getting bombarded with things from outer space, and that's why it kind of looks like the moon and has all these scars, all of these craters. Next planet is Venus. It's the second planet from the sun. What's unique about Venus is it has the thickest atmosphere of the terrestrial planets. And because of that thick atmosphere, and also volcanoes on the surface, Venus is actually the hottest planet in our solar system. A lot of people think that Mercury is the hottest planet in our solar system because it's so close to the sun. But in fact, it's actually Venus because of the thick clouds. Again, think about that car. When you roll up the windows in the summer, the car gets hot on the inside because the heat gets trapped inside. Same thing happens on Venus. Venus has a bunch of windows. It's called an atmosphere, very thick atmosphere. When the heat goes in, it gets trapped. Combine that with the volcanoes on the surface, and Venus is the hottest surface temperature in the solar system, even though it's actually the second farthest from, or it's not the closest to the sun, it's actually the second closest to the sun in terms of our planets in the solar system. What this creates is a very hostile, dangerous environment. We could never live here, nor do we think any life exists on Venus because, first of all, it's a very thick, acidic atmosphere that burns up almost everything that comes into the atmosphere. Also, it has volcanoes on its surface and it traps in heat well. Since it does all of these things, Venus has a very hostile environment. It's very dangerous to go there, and we don't think life exists there, nor do we think we will ever exist there. So there is no known life on Venus, and any dreams of human beings maybe living on Venus someday, well, we better forget about those, even though it's fairly close to Earth. We're going to skip Earth, actually, because this is Earth science. We already studied a lot about the Earth. We're actually going to go right to Mars. Mars is called the red planet. The reason why it's called the red planet is Mars has a lot of rocks on its surface, and some of those rocks contain iron. Well, if you've ever left a piece of iron outside, what happens? It rusts, and rust is kind of that reddish-orange color. Well, Mars has had a similar effect on it, in which a lot of its iron is rusted, therefore it gives it kind of this orangish, maybe reddish hue to it, so it's called the red planet. Also, don't believe the hype. There are no Martians on Mars. As a matter of fact, even though some scientists believe there's life on Mars, actually no proven life on Mars, especially Martians. So any scientific or science fiction movie you watch that has Martians, they're probably from a Hollywood studio, and they're definitely not from Mars. So think about that. No Martians on Mars. One thing we do know Mars has is frozen ice. If you'll notice, you can kind of see in this video at the very top, it turns white at the North and the South Pole, just like here on Earth. It has polar ice caps. The water on Mars, we believe, used to be running, but unfortunately it has been frozen on the North and the South Pole, just like here on Earth, and it has frozen polar caps. Another unique thing about Mars is it has the largest volcano in the solar system. This is called Olympus Mons. Some scientists believe Olympus Mons is by far the biggest volcano in the solar system. Some scientists believe it's the size of several states. So if you took like 2 or 3 states, combine their size, states as in here in the United States, they would be the size of the Olympus Mons volcano on Mars, but a very large volcano called Olympus Mons. Some scientists do believe Mars used to have running water, and the reason why they believe it is right now it's frozen on the North and South Pole, like I mentioned earlier, but also you can see Mars kind of has those scars, kind of like Mercury had from all the debris hitting Mercury from outer space. However, scientists believe those scars on Mars are actually old riverbeds or old lakes, or proof that water existed at one point on Mars. So we know that Mars has water because it's frozen on the North and the South Pole, but these scars on Mars allow us to kind of think that maybe at one point Mars used to have running water. And this is why some scientists believe we could live there. I don't personally believe that. I don't think we'll see that in our lifetime, but some scientists do believe we could live there. One of the reasons why Mars is close, that's one reason why we can get there fairly easily, but also it does have water on the poles, which scientists think we can tap into and maybe live there someday. Again, I don't believe that. I don't think we'll do it, especially not in our lifetime, but there are some scientists that believe we could live there in the future because it is fairly similar climate-wise to the Earth. Moving out to the Jovian planets, biggest planet in our solar system is Jupiter. By far the largest planet, but it's actually significantly smaller than the Sun. This tells you how big the Sun is. Even though Jupiter is the biggest planet by far in our solar system, it would take 800 Jupiters combined to reach the mass of one Sun. So it's a really, really big planet, but it's not that big compared to the Sun. A large amount of gas. Again, the Jovian planets, the planets that are farther away from the Sun, have much more gas because the gas is never evaporated due to the Sun's heat because they're farther away. Also, Jupiter has many moons, at least 28 that we know of so far. Actually, if you look this up, you'll probably find a number that's greater than 28. The reason why is scientists are finding new moons all the time on the 4 Jovian planets, the planets that are farther away from the Earth. So Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Scientists are always finding new moons on these planets, and frankly, those moons are always disappearing because the planets are so big, the moon goes to the other side of the planet. They might not see that moon for several years. So right now, officially, there are 28, but there may be more soon as scientists seem to be finding new moons and new objects floating around these Jovian planets all the time. Many rings, you can't see them on Jupiter, but every Jovian planet does have rings. Most pictures you see of Jupiter will not show the rings, but if you look closely in some pictures, you'll see that they do have rings. Finally, I have a really, really cool storm system on Jupiter, which has been going on since we've been able to observe Jupiter. It's called the Great Red Spot. It is the biggest storm in our solar system because it's on the biggest planet. Basically, it's like a very large hurricane on Jupiter without water, if that makes sense. It's just like a huge storm. As you can see, as Jupiter zooms in, you'll see right here, this is the Great Red Spot. This storm changes sizes, but scientists believe you could fit several Earths. There it is right there. There's a good picture of the Great Red Spot. You could actually fit several Earths, so the whole planet of Earth, inside that one storm. So the largest storm in the solar system is called the Great Red Spot. Jupiter is by far the largest planet. It has moons and rings, as all the Jovian planets do, and it's actually one of the cooler planets you can see if you look through a telescope. Moving further out is one of the most recognizable planets in our solar system, and that is Saturn. What stands out about Saturn is the rings. Probably the only planet with, sometimes your naked eye, you can look up in outer space at the right time, and you can see that Saturn has rings. Again, Saturn, like all other Jovian planets, also has moons, 31 moons, again, that we know of officially, but again, that number kind of seems to change sometimes, and scientists are finding new ones, and old ones are kind of disappearing all the time. So 31 that we know of, but there could be more than that. Very strong winds up to 932 miles an hour. A really strong storm here on Earth might have winds maybe 60, 80 miles per hour. But on Saturn, you're looking at storms that are huge, or very strong. Again, a lot of gas in these Jovian planets, up to 932 miles per hour on Saturn that we've recorded. Very strong storms because of those strong winds, and a very large planet, second largest planet in our solar system, next to, of course, Jupiter, which is the largest. But Saturn, one of the most recognizable planets because it has all the rings and the moons, and it's very large. What's cool about Saturn is a day on Saturn is about 30 Earth years. So one time, meaning one day on Saturn, is about 30 Earth years. So basically my entire life has been basically one Saturn day. This is because the planet is so big, it takes so long for it to make one complete turn. So Saturn, second biggest planet in our solar system, lots of rings and moons, lots of strong wind storms, and a really, 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 really long day. Moving further out, a very unique planet is Uranus. Some people say Uranus, I know that, but some scientists say Uranus. So either one, Uranus, whatever. But it's a sideways planet. That's what's cool about Uranus. So you can see it has rings just like all the Jovian planets, and it rotates on its side. Some scientists believe the reason why Uranus rotates on its side is because it used to be possibly a moon of either Jupiter or Saturn that somehow escaped the gravitational pull of those planets, kind of took off flying out into outer space, and for whatever reason kind of landed on its side, but it is known as the sideways planet. Like I've said with the other Jovian planets, it does have rings. We didn't actually know this until maybe 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago or so. I'd have to look it up. We thought Uranus did not have rings, but it actually does. And we always kind of thought that it rotated on its side. But once we discovered that these rings were on Uranus and they were sideways, we knew that Uranus does rotate sideways, thus being called the sideways planet. It does have many moons, just like all the Jovian planets, and is gassy, just like all the Jovian planets. So again, Jovian planets, all gassy, all have rings, and all have moons. It just happens that Uranus is sideways. And our final planet is Neptune. Remember, there is no Pluto anymore. Pluto is no longer considered a planet anymore. It's considered a dwarf planet, but no longer a planet because it was so small. It is no longer considered a planet. As a matter of fact, scientists now believe there are 7 moons around Neptune, Saturn, and Uranus that are actually bigger than the planet Pluto, and that's why there is no Pluto anymore. But Neptune is our final planet. It is our 8th planet, and just like the other Jovian planets, it's very stormy, high wind speeds, again, 600 miles per hour, which would be significantly greater than anything we see here on Earth, again, because the planet's so big and has so much gas. Also, this is really, really cool stuff, in my opinion. Neptune used to have what was called the Great Dark Spot. Scientists didn't really know what this was. It was kind of mysterious, but they believed it was basically a big storm on Neptune. The reason why I put had is the great dark spot in like the last, I'd say, 5 years or so actually disappeared on Neptune, and they haven't seen it in a long, long time. But they think it's just on the other side of Neptune. Because it's a storm, it's always kind of moving and reshaping itself, but they haven't seen it in a long time. That's why I put it had the great dark spot. Scientists still believe it's there, but they haven't seen it for a while. And it always was kind of a mysterious thing out in outer space that a lot of people that believe in conspiracies believed in, but it's no longer there, and scientists don't know where it went. So, of course, all the conspiracy theorists think that it has to do with something with aliens or UFOs or something, but it does have the great dark spot. We just don't know where it's at, but we're not even sure if it's still there or not. Just like all the other Jovian planets, moons and lots of gas, and just like all the other Jovian planets, it has, it has rings as well. So Neptune, very high wind speeds, had the great dark spot at one time, 13 known moons. This video does not show the rings around Neptune, but it has rings as well. So all the Jovian planets have rings, including Neptune. So that's it for your solar system notes. Come up and show me these, and you will get full credit. Good luck.